The single most important point I need to make about the Raptor is that it is seriously, ridiculously fun to ride. We'll talk a lot about its accessibility to newer riders, and it is a very user-friendly ATV. But if you've never experienced a sport ATV, let me make a case real quick. 4x4 ATVs are fun, and we're all about ATVs in general, but nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, can compare to the raw connectivity a rider can have with a sport quad, and the Raptor 700R represents the peak of performance, especially for the weekend warrior. If you've never whipped the rear end around on a long sweeping turn on a Raptor, trying it might change your life. As my Dirt Tracks bud so eloquently put it, it's spiritual. But it's more than high-speed turns. A Raptor wants you to ride it. You have more control of the power delivery with a manual transmission, power going to the ground much more effectively through a chain and sprockets, and braking inputs mean a heck of a lot more when your front and rear independent brakes are only stopping the tires you want them to, and only managing a 400-pound machine. All of that translates to a lot more rider control and a raw, interactive experience with the machine. Not to mention that body weight inputs actually mean something on a Raptor. Here's the thing, modern 4x4 ATVs have come a long way, but ultimately, you're a passenger on a very capable, very comfortable machine, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some days, that's the right flavor. But if you need to get your blood boiling, let off a little steam, and feel like you've done something at the end of the day, then grab some freaking gears, dance through the trees, hit some jumps, and pull some wheelies, because the Raptor 700R is the fiery little seductress that will actually match that level of enthusiasm. But let's start at the beginning. The Raptor 700 has been a mainstay on the market and very close to its original form for 18 years. The first version, the Raptor 660, originally hit the market in 2001, but the engine got a larger bore aluminum cylinder, bumping it to 686 cc's with frame and suspension geometry redesigns in 2006. In 2015, a few tweaks to the engine, including a bump in compression and changes to the fuel mapping, essentially gave us the machine we have today. Now, Yamaha has consistently reaffirmed their commitment to sport quads, being the only major manufacturer to still offer full-fledged adult-sized sport ATVs, to continue producing both the Raptor 700 and its sportier, higher-strung sibling, the YFZ 450, for as long as they can. The simplicity of the Raptor goes back to the very origins of Yamaha's history on four wheels, to the Moto 4200 in 1984. That little single thumper had more utility than most big bores do today, and it quickly evolved in size, eventually to the 350cc four-stroke that powered the big bears, and the machine that started the obsession for me personally, the venerable Warrior 350.
When it comes to high performance, Yamaha is on the leading edge. The Warrior. The biggest four-stroke single in the sport class. Crank up the easy electric starting, and it handles like a dream, with independent front suspension and race-bred monocross in the rear. Plus reverse from any gear and hydraulic disc brakes all around.
Today's version of the Raptor 700 represents the evolution of the Warrior 350. The Raptor's fuel injection is far less temperamental than a carburetor. Its large-bore single outperformed the similarly intentioned 400 class, and Yamaha prioritized handling in the suspension and frame geometry, but it's still got the DNA that made the Warrior so fun. It's got the low-end torque and the 5-speed gearbox with reverse. Alright, one of the things we want to show you guys, especially folks new to the Raptor, is how easy it is to ride. So what I'm going to have Brent do here is take off using just the clutch, and what the Raptor is very good at doing is teaching somebody new to using a clutched ATV or even a motorcycle how to feel the friction zone and the clutch engagement on the machine even without applying throttle. Go ahead, Brent. So the Raptor 700 has reverse, but the process for putting it in reverse is simplified. You've got your dial over there. Brent's going to turn the machine on, put it in first gear. Then what he's going to do is twist the dial, kick the foot shift down, and it'll be in reverse. Right? Twist the dial, holding in the clutch, kick down the foot shift, reverse indicator on the dash, and he's rolling backwards. And as you can see, all he needs to do to roll backwards is let the clutch out just a little bit. He doesn't even have his hand on the throttle right now, and he can get himself out of any situation. The reservoir shocks on the front of the R and the RSE models are outstanding for stock suspension, and performance-wise, they are the key difference between the base model 700 and the R or the SE models. Even the base model suspension with its 5-way preload adjustment is better than you might expect. I rode a stock 700 base model happily for several years before upgrading the suspension. But if you don't plan on upgrading the suspension, the R or the SE models is worth the extra money for more preload adjustability as well as compression and rebound adjustment. We wouldn't call the suspension plush so much as capable. You're going to feel a lot more trail feedback than you would on a modern 4x4, but that's just part of the Raptor's charm. We certainly exceed the standard weight that the suspension comes set up for from the factory, but even without any adjustment and a couple of flat drops on a slight incline, we didn't bottom out the front suspension, and nothing on the trails, even with a healthy pace, came close to pushing the limits. Where a Raptor does outperform any 4x4 ATV is its agility. The Raptor is perfect for tight, twisty trails, and as you build confidence, you can zip through even the tightest trails, applying power where you'd have to be much more careful on a 4x4 with twice the mass. But let's talk about that engine for a bit. You probably heard the term single thumper thrown around a lot for dirt bikes, dual sports, and quads, and they're universally praised for their low-end torque and low maintenance needs. That's exactly what makes the Raptor 700R a great trail machine. A single-cylinder 4-stroke engine is simple. It's only firing on one of the 4 strokes, which means power is only being applied to the rear wheel about 25% of the time. That's ideal for off-road because when tires aren't laying down power, they're recovering grip, which means traction. And that's why a Raptor, even with the tiny little nubs on its tires, has a ridiculous amount of traction under steady throttle. If I slow some of these clips down and leave the sound in, you can hear the firing order and see how power is applied to the rear wheels. Another benefit of the big single is that it's happy to lug along at low RPMs. And that makes the Raptor easy to get along with. You can thump around a gear too high and not worry about stalling. Grab a lower gear and press the throttle, and you're right back into peak power. So really what makes the Raptor so easy to ride is like, you can kind of pick your gear and the engine will lug so low. I can roll around here in second and third gear, get it to really low RPMs, where I'm just kind of crawling. It's not like you're shifting constantly to keep it happy. The Raptor is just kind of good-natured. So through there you can kind of hear what I mean. Being a gear too high, you hear that and then it spools up. That's what I mean by being good-natured as far as a trail machine. But don't let that lull you into complacency. The Raptor makes about mid-40s in the horsepower. Let's call it 45 horsepower for the sake of argument. But it weighs 422 pounds wet. That power to weight ratio has few contenders on the market. Solid rear axles are fun because of their predictability. You can sweep the back end around and the machine will always be compliant. The downside, and what keeps some folks skittish about giving a sport quad a chance, is the lack of ground clearance. I mean, realistically, that's about 4.5 inches, but if my wife asks, that's 8 inches all day long. But all that limited ground clearance really does is change your line selection. Of course, it's possible to get high-centered in deep ruts, but with the ridiculous tire sizes on side-by-sides these days, you'll be contending with that even on the biggest 4x4 ATV. The Raptor's agility can really overcome most obstacles with a little bit of creativity. But that brings us to our next point, who the Raptor's right for. I love the Raptor 700. It is my favorite ATV of all time. But our goal here isn't to sell you on what we like, it's to match the right ATV with the right person. Something that's going to keep you happy and hopefully keep handlebars in your hands for a long time. Let's be honest, if you're still here at this point in the video and you've rewatched the first 2 minutes, the Raptor is probably the machine for you. It has no competition on the market other than the YFZ 450, but the YFZ 450 is the track to the Raptor's trail. They're both awesome machines, and both can be fun regardless of your riding intention, but the Raptor 700R is the more trail-friendly of the two and requires less maintenance over time, so it's a little easier to own. The one thing we'd want our viewers to consider is where they're going to ride. Most off-road riding areas have been overrun by side-by-sides, and while that doesn't automatically mean it's a no-go zone for sport quads, what it does mean is that some areas are just too torn up to be enjoyable. We've done thousands of miles at the Hatfield-McCoy trails on our Raptors, and we've had a blast every time. Any place that does any sort of trail maintenance, which a lot of times is public land areas, those are perfect. There's also a lot of 50-inch restricted trails all over the country in national forests. Yamaha helps ensure that they stay maintained and open through their Outdoor Access initiative. Those trails aren't as well known and they're almost never advertised, but they become a mecca for ATVs and dirt bikes. If you have a smaller ride area close by, like the 350 acres in Canmer, Kentucky where we film most of our videos, a Raptor is ideal. Nothing's more fun than a sport quad for session riding in areas that you're familiar with. But those same areas can be too small and get a little too redundant for a side-by-side or a 4x4 ATV. But of course, you know your local area better than I do. So do some research and be realistic about where you can ride most often, and then choose your machine accordingly. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. We hope you enjoyed our presentation of the Raptor 700. Let us know what you think about the machine in the comments, and we'll see you next time right here on Dirt Obsession.